Welcome to Baseball Biz. I'm Mark Carpenter, your host, and with me is my co-host, Mr. Brandon No Way. How you doing today, Brandon?
I mean, I could be better. It could be a little worse, but I can't complain too much. How about yourself?
All right, you asked how I'm doing. I'll tell you how I'm doing. I am confused. I'm confounded. I'm looking for comfort. I'm looking for some other C word to actually say, let's have something new. I would like to say I'm confident about the future. But after yesterday, no, not what the things went down in Jupiter with with Manfred, MLB, and the union. I mean, it was a crazy. It was just it was a crap show.
Oh,
okay,
sorry, break your concentration.
No, I'm sorry if I broke yours.
Yeah, I mean it's confusing and crap show is the nice way of putting it. There's other things you can call it, but
We're a family
it's just
show.
overall a bad look for baseball.
It is.
Yes, Family Show has saved us a few times.
Oh gosh, and let's face it, you and I know this, and everybody else knows it. This is really nothing when you look at what's going on in the world today. I mean, everything going on with the people of Ukraine and the attacks that's being going on with them. Baseball, as I was talking with Lou Schiff earlier, it's a distraction at best. But I felt weird. I mean, yesterday I was listening, Brandon, and I'm hearing Zelensky speaking to the European leaders. He's the guy who's translating. He breaks down in tears, and the European leaders, you can see that they're all enthralled, and they applaud him when he finishes the speech. And I'm thinking, my gosh, he's reached these people, on a note, on something that's serious and has great value to the world. And then I'm hearing, oh, and by the way, at 5:00 we got a press conference with Manfred. I'm like, I'm sorry, these two things should not happen in the same day.
Yeah, and I've been saying for how long that there are bigger things in the world going on right now.
Yeah.
And that was before we were on the verge of a third world war. Yeah. And now you add that to it on top of already COVID, even though, life seems to doesn't go on now as it is. But I mean, this is just bad timing for baseball. They're like the drunk uncle that can't read the room.
Well, yeah, and there's been a drunk uncle for a while, unfortunately. No, there's a lot more important things in the world than baseball. But like I said, it's a distraction. And good Lord, when it comes to distractions, Rob Manfred has given us plenty of that. And I think, what's next? And even everything going on with the lockout in the news yesterday of saying, guess what? It's continuing, guys, because we couldn't come up with an agreement. I just want to throw up my hands and say, what? Who are you talking about? And what was it, Brandon? I mean, even before yesterday, there were some people on CBS. Some of them were saying, it's looking really close. It looks like we're going to have a deal. I think I'm hearing positive things coming out of the MLB camp. MLB is the one who's putting in all these new changes. For a moment, could you take me? I want to get to Lou's interview in here just a second. Yeah, you sent me a tweet from Austin Gomber, I guess. I don't know, Jumber. And I believe he's a pitcher in MLB. But go ahead, if you would, read to me what he said on in that tweet, because I thought it really kind of hit the core of maybe how things were devolving during those Jupiter meetings between the union and MLB.
Yeah, he basically tweeted out a picture of a statement saying, quote, "It got to be like 12:30 and the fine print of their CBT proposal was stuff we had never seen before," Stripling said. "They were trying to sneak things through us. It was like they think we're dumb baseball players and we get sleepy after midnight or something. It's like that stupid football quote, they are who we thought they were. They did exactly what they thought they would do. They pushed us to a deadline that they imposed, and then they tried to sneak some past us at the deadline, and we were ready for it. We've been ready for 5 years, and then they try to flip it on us today in PR, saying that we've changed our tone and tried to make it look like it was our fault. That never happened."
Well, that kind of goes to the tone and feel of that. But I wanted to find out more about it. So we did reach out to somebody who's very knowledgeable about baseball and management and compromise. What better to reach out to a judge who actually teaches legal cases about baseball and the law?
You mean The Judge Lou Schiff.
I mean, the Judge Lou Schiff, indeed. So, yeah, we're talking about the Judge Lou Schiff, and he has been an expert on this for years. Like I said, both as a fan and as somebody who teaches as well as a judge and the fine art of compromise. He brings people together. He brings things and makes them happen. And if we ever needed somebody like that, it is now. I saw what was going on with the Marlins recently, with Derek Jeter leaving, and lo and behold, I thought, man, wouldn't it be great if Lou was in there? If he could bring things together, he could be the representative of the owners for the Marlins, who could help maybe even sit at that table in Jupiter and bring people together. I'm going to write a letter or at least an email to the owner, Mr. Sherman, and tell him he needs to consider making sure that he has Lou on his board, that he has him as the president, taking the place of Mr. Jeter. We'll talk about that more, but here's the interview with Lou. The Honorable Lou Schiff here today on Baseball Biz. And the nice thing about Lou is he's not just somebody who's a great fan. He's somebody who studies the law and what's happened with the game. But today, he's here as a Marlins fan primarily, but more than that. And we're going to talk about it in a minute because, yeah, there's nothing been going on about baseball this week. But it started out with Derek Jeter and the Marlins. What's happening, Lou? How you doing, buddy?
I'm fine, and it's good to see you again, Mark. It's good to be back. Yeah, this week started off as far as baseball goes. I mean, it's been a very sad week worldwide with what's going on in Ukraine and everything over there. So, but as far as I'm here today to talk about baseball, what's happening in baseball, it doesn't matter compared to what's going on in Europe right now. It just doesn't matter. There are so many other things. Baseball falls to the absolute bottom of what's important in this world right now.
It's a distraction at best.
It's a distraction at best. You're absolutely right. But I think we were all surprised when we learned earlier this week that Derek Jeter, the captain, was handed in his cleats and his suit and his pens and his briefcase, and was leaving the Marlins. And I think that came as a shock. I spoke to somebody down at the Marlins the day that it happened, and I think they were in total shock as well. Somebody inside the organization was very, very surprised about it. I've never met Derek Jeter. I've met the owner of the Marlins, Bruce Sherman, and I've had conversation with him, but I've never met Mr. Jeter. And I thought that they were on a 5 or 6 year plan to do things with the ball club.
And Laurie and Sampson did their deal for a while, and obviously handed the keys over to Sherman and Jeter.
And the keys for billions of dollars.
Yeah, for billions of dollars for an industry that's not making any money at all.
No, they're not making any money at all. Oh, did I say that sarcastically enough?
No, surely not.
They're not. There's a lineup of wealthy individuals who would be happy to buy a baseball franchise now, but no, they're not making any money from what I understand.
Yeah. Well, ask me something. I mean, let me ask you something about the architecture within the organization of the Marlins, because I saw Jeter. Here's a guy who's been in the game, who understands what it's all about. I've always said we need a player in there because they can see both sides of this. But I wondered, with everything that was going on with the lockout and the CBA, is Jeter scratching his head? Was he feeling pulled between, you think, two different ways with it, with the union and the owners?
Your guess is as good as mine. I thought, from a fan standpoint, we go back to the year they won 31 games and made the playoffs, and then beat the Cubs in the playoffs, which nobody expected. And then, of course, the Braves came along and did what everybody expected that to happen, swept them. But I was liking where, for the most part, where the team was starting to go. They were getting young pitching. I thought last year would have been a better season, but it wasn't. They had some injuries. They couldn't fill the catcher spot very well. I thought getting rid of Adam Duvall towards the end of the year was the greatest gift the Braves could ever get. And in exchange, we got the kid's name was Jackson. We couldn't find any catching. And look, it happens. It truly happens. But I thought they were starting to build a core, with Jazz and Miguel. They were starting to build a core with Anderson and Cooper and guys that seem to want to play. Lewis Brinson, they gave him every opportunity to play. I think he came in here, people thought that he would be another Stanton or another Christian Yelich because that's what the trade was for, and it just didn't work out. And no matter how hard he seemed to try, he couldn't hit above 200. He had one good streak at the beginning of last season, and it looked like he was going to come into his own game, and it didn't happen. But I don't know why, owners and presidents part. Obviously, there had to be a difference in views, a difference in management styles. I think everybody was surprised because he had 1 year left to go on a contract, and Miguel Rojas had a lot of respect for him. He's the unofficial team leader, and after Jeter left, Rojas tweeted how much he respected him and how much he's going to miss him, and so it will have an effect on the ball players. But maybe he didn't like his role in the front office. Maybe he felt that he wasn't being consulted. Maybe he didn't like how they were spending. I think what was good about the Marlins, they didn't air their grievances in the press. This is not like New York where you read about conflicts between the owner and the general manager and things like that. Whatever was going on in the front office kind of stayed in the front office until it was time to pull the plug. And it just came at an odd time. And right in the middle of labor negotiations, it came. And the next thing you know, I saw a picture on Twitter of the parking spot that Jeter's supposed to park in over Roger Dean Stadium. And it had three of the cones that they used on the roadway. And there were 3 cones there, and they said that's where Jeter normally parks, and he was absent. Yeah. That was the morning he announced that he was, not going to come back.
Wow!
So now the search is on for a new president, and I've jokingly, there's 2 spots I'd love to do in baseball. One would be a first base coach. First base coach, guy gets a hit, hey, good job. You take out your stopwatch, you figure, hey, go to second, come back. But in all seriousness, it would be a great challenge to take Jeter's spot as a president of the Marlins. Not that I have baseball playing experience, but I certainly have a lot of, and I had got some calls from friends, serious calls saying, "Are you going to apply for this spot?" And I don't know if I'm going to apply. I've got this wonderful relationship with the citizens of Broward County, and I'm in my last term as a county judge, and I love what I do. But there's that little thing in the back of my head saying, as my father used to say, if you don't ask, the answer is no. So we'll see. I don't know. Do they want a 66-year-old baseball fan that understands contracts and understands the law and understands management, because I've been involved in management to help guide them? It would certainly be a wonderful experience, something that would be a challenge. That's for sure.
Yeah, but you were saying you're not from the playing out on the field, but being a season ticket holder, being a fan, I mean, to me, everything about what you just said makes you more than qualified. But I think the passion that you bring in from that, the knowledge that you're talking about.
Thank you. I'll give you Richard Sermon's personal email address. You can send him a note before I drop him a line.
We certainly will.
I enjoy baseball. I got to tell you, Mark, I'm so disheartened by this lockout.
Yeah,
this was preventable. This and this may cost me my opportunity to apply for a job for the Marlins, but it was preventable because the owners did not have to lock the players out. The owners could have said, "We're opening up. We don't have a collective bargaining agreement, so we'll go by the old agreement till we make a new agreement. And we'll work really hard to do this. And then if they can't come to an agreement, then the players could elect to strike. But to only negotiate for basically 2 or 3 days when they had 90 some odd days, and then to have them, and now that they've canceled the first week of the season."
Well, here's the thing. Basically, I think Tony Clark said the other day that a lockout is the biggest economic weapon. I think those were his words that could be used. You know, you and I talked before, we were talking about Justice Sotomayor when she was a federal judge, and she brought everybody back to the table. And they needed to be there the whole time. And that's the same thing here today. They needed to be here the whole time. They've been talking about this at least since last April, but then the doors were closed, December 2nd. And it was almost like another 60 days before they were open again. Guess what? The motivation, yes, for all the fans and players was there, but evidently not the willingness to negotiate on the side of MLB. And this is what we wind up with.
And again, I don't know if it's MLB and I don't know if it's the players, because I'm sure there's room for compromise even more, because, if we're going to have baseball, there's going to have to be more compromise. There's going to have to be a meet in the middle point, or a meet at a 40% point, or a meet at a 60% point. There's going to have to be that.
Well, and I understand it, but I guess my concern was that the gates were closed by MLB. Right. And discussions were just closed.
Absolutely.
And now I'm not just saying, raise the flag for the players all the time on all this. Like you, I'm thinking that there has to be the word compromise. Some people forget what that's about. And I think a lot of times now that the players have felt like they've compromised over the last several CBAs, and they're sticking in. But if we can come back to the Marlins for a moment too, I think you would bring so much more to that, because, like I said, you have the fan background, you've got the background of working with contracts and all that. You're a people person. I think you would be a great bridge, across from. People seem to forget there's not just the players and the owners, there are the fans, and to be able to have a mindset that can see all of those pieces together will help build the success for the Marlins and for everybody who's involved with the game.
Fans need a voice. And it's tough being the president of any organization. I served as president of the Conference of County Court Judges of Florida about 10 years ago. And that's a tough, they're great colleagues, but everybody sometimes has different ideas. And then you go to the legislature and we talk to the legislature about what our ideas are for laws and things. It's a compromise business. Life's a compromise. Every time I sit in court means that it's in civil court, parties couldn't reach an agreement, and they're saying to me, they're giving me the authority to make a decision that's going to be binding on them. Now, obviously, if you don't like a decision that a judge makes, you have a right to an appeal. But for the most part, judges' decisions are very rarely appealed. And so, as a judge, I'm a huge advocate for getting the parties to work up their case, so they can see what they have and they can see what the other side have, and then getting them to go sit down with one another and resolve their differences. I really believe that when parties mediate and they settle and both parties think that the other side got the better of them, then you have a good compromise. But when you leave it to somebody that, again, a judge, an arbitrator, they have no interest in the case. So they're going to rule based upon the facts and the law. And that's the ruling, and it's over and done with. And that's part of our system. It's just a shame that we can't get millionaires and billionaires to agree, because the game that you and I enjoy so much, it's going to be tough to get back and start rooting again for folks. It's just, I don't know, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Is that a good way of saying it?
I think that's accurate.
Is that it, Mark? I mean, someone suggested I start watching college ball. I'll watch a little bit more college ball, watch some independent baseball. I think you spoke with Josh. Have you ever spoken to Josh Schwab, who's he'd be a great guest for you, who's the commissioner of the American Association of Independent Baseball? That's a fun league. That's where the St. Paul Saints used to play until they became the AAA affiliate of the Twins. It's a great league. You've got young ball players who are, some of them play big league ball. Some of them are trying to get a chance to get back into the show. Some of these ball players have never played big league ball, but they were kind of stars in high school or college, and they want an opportunity for somebody to see them. And it's a fun league. The pay isn't much, but they're not doing it for the pay. They're doing it for the fun and the opportunity maybe to play at a higher level. I think that's what's missing from Major League Baseball right now. And it's a business, and it is about money. I don't understand. The commissioner has laid the full blame at the feet of the Players Association, and that's just wrong.
Yeah, I agree with you. And much as you were saying, like within the Marlins organization, they were taking care of business inside the office until something was resolved on several issues. And that I didn't feel like that was happening, at least where we are up to date as far as Major League Baseball and the union, that there's always some pointing back and forth in between meetings. There's, yes, our side's done all this and we've made a special effort, but yeah, there was always a but or there's a however, and those things need to be put to the side because fans don't care. Okay. Fans don't care. I think both sides have their legitimate reasons and they need to be resolved, much like by somebody yourself, somebody who can give a fresh approach, a fresh opinion about that.
This is going to be the second longest lockout in the history of Major League Baseball. We're already at the second longest lockout. The longest, obviously, was in 93 and 94 when we had no World Series. But as of last night, we were day 90 of a lockout. The longest lockout before this was 200 and this is the longest lockout in the history of baseball. Right now at 90 days. The second longest lockout was in 1990, where it was 32 days, but no games were lost. So we're now at the longest lockout in the history of baseball, and we're going to lose games by it. Of course, the strike in 94, 95, they lost close to 1,000 games, and they lost the playoffs, and they lost the World Series, and it took them years to recover. It took years for baseball to recover, and it may take years for baseball to recover. If both sides are so concerned about money, and they are, why would you give up right now what amounts to 5% of your season? Are they so rich that they can just afford to say goodbye to 5% of the season? And then what about all the people that work in the stadium? The minimum wage folks, the folks that really depend upon, this is a second job for many people. They depend upon selling sodas and beers and hot dogs and programs and the cleaning staff and the cooking staff and the parking staff. They depend upon this. They depend upon this income. And now the doors are shut for these folks that depend upon it. And then you take the cities in Florida and in Arizona, and we are now going to take away the tourist dollars right up, 40 miles north of here, where the Marlins and the Cardinals play. Marlins fans don't exactly travel well. Okay. But if you go up to a Marlins game at Roger Dean Stadium and they're playing the Cardinals, it doesn't matter whether the Marlins are the home team or the visitors team. The Cardinal fans travel great. I mean, they all come down from the Midwest. There's a hotel across the street from the stadium. You have to reserve that 8 years in advance. Whatever it is, all those shops there that depend upon, that's their holiday season, basically. They have 6 weeks to make their money. And that's all gone. And the same thing out in Arizona. They have 6 weeks to make their money. All these little businesses that are dependent upon baseball, and now it's gone. It's evaporated. It's a shame.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a shame. And I don't know that people, when they're talking at those levels, that's really a consideration in their mindset. It should be. It should be.
Said it at the same time, Mark. It absolutely. I say it all the time that whatever my position, I can't do what I do without my clerks. Not my clerks; they're the clerks from the system. But without the clerks, without the deputies, without my judicial assistant, without all the folks that comprise the system. I'm just one of hundreds of people that comprise the system. And without the folks that support us, you can't get your job done. Yeah. And it doesn't seem that Major League Baseball understands that. There's no. Craig Calcaterra wrote this morning, and he writes a column called "Cup of Coffee." It's a subscription magazine that he publishes every day. Thursdays he gives it away for free. And another great read is Ken Rosenthal, and another great Howard Cole over on the West Coast. Really, really good. Like to wake up in the morning, I get up early. I like to read what they have to say. And Craig Calcaterra this morning, as well as Howard Cole and Ken Rosenthal, really went after the commissioner for what he was doing. Craig really went after him, saying, after the meeting, he left and he was driven in his limousine to the airport where he flew at his private jet back to New York, and he was sleeping last night in his multi-million-dollar condominium someplace. Fans can't identify with that. I can't identify with that either. Fans aren't screaming so much about ticket prices. They do, but fans want to see baseball, and baseball has done everything it knows how to do to tell the younger generation, go watch soccer, go watch hockey, go watch curling at the Olympics, go watch another sport. And they think that people are just going to come. If you open the doors, they're going to come. Not after this fight.
No.
They're shooting themselves in the foot.
Well, you were talking earlier, we both were earlier, about 94, 95. And a lot of people left. I mean, I'm talking about viewers. They went elsewhere. NFL, NBA were continuing to grow during that time. Bam, right. Lost them there. And you look at people who enjoy baseball right now. One guy online all the time is John Boy. And John Boy's out there. Read him. Yeah. The boy's out there. What he's watching cricket now. that's his new thing. And I'm trying to drive people more and more to softball and collegiate games and baseball and collegiate games. Minor league season will be starting here soon. There is a abundance of other things where folks are going to be spending dollars, but not with Major League Baseball.
And with us finally coming out of COVID, and we're not there yet, but we're finally coming out of it. People are going to start looking for entertainment. People are going to start looking to do things, and baseball is not going to be a consideration. Maybe you'll watch it on TV, but do you really want to go down to a ball game where you have there again? It's a fight, and they should have resolved this. But they waited too long. And I'm not blaming either side. But Major League Baseball never had to lock the players out. They could have opened those gates and said, we will negotiate. Let's have spring training. That gives you some sort of a positive energy. We are going to try. We're going to try to do this, and let's work this out because it's best for the union and the players. It's best for the owners, and it's best for the fans.
Well, I think you hit it right there on the head, Lou. I tell you what, man, I'd like to go on and on. So the one thing I do want to remind folks is that, yes, he's the author of Baseball and the Law, and you can find out case studies and such of what he covers there. But more importantly, today, he should be considered for the president position with the Marlins, boys and girls. Send your letters and cards in there to Mr. Sherman and tell him why, because I'm certainly going to do it. It's, to me, you're the face, you're the mindset that needs to be there to help this game thrive. And if for some reason they don't select you for president, hey, Rob Manfred, start looking for another job today because we got the guy who's going to be able to bridge.
We had another judge, once serve as commissioner. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, the first one out of the gate did that too. So the first commissioner.
He had some issues that.
True.
He wasn't. And we could talk about the downside of Judge Landis. For all he did, he kept baseball segregated, and that was obviously wrong.
Yeah,
he had opportunities, and he didn't do that. He may have kept some corruption out of the game, but he didn't do right by it. And that's the downfall on his legacy. That's the wrong part about it.
Well, the good news is you're enlightened.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And you bring a credibility, like I said, both as a fan as somebody who understands how to work with people. We talk about compromise and having to bring two parties together who are at odds with one another. That's the sort of thing we need in kind of any business, whether it be at a franchise or whether it be at a corporate level with a union and Major League Baseball. So I want to say it again, polish up that resume.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, Mark.
Always a pleasure having you here. Oh, and one last thing I want to say. You were talking about Craig Calcaterra. I've been looking, I know he's got a book coming out in April, and I can't wait because I can't imagine it being even any more relevant than right now, because he's talking about, I think, the fans taking the power back in control of what baseball is. And I've got to get that man on here because to me, that is essential right now. All right, everybody. Well, thank you all again for joining us here on Baseball Biz. And thank you, Honorable Lou Schiff, candidate for president for the Marlins. And I'm hoping
it's on the bucket list of things, but it would be interesting, That'd be one job. Tough to turn down. Okay, that'd be a tough job to turn down.
All right, brother. Well, you take care, man. Right. And I look forward to having you on here again sometime soon.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Well, that's Lou Schiff. And if you want to find out more about what he's talking about, follow him on Twitter at Baseball and Law. That's Baseball and Law, and spelled out AND. Anyway, he puts a lot of neat stuff up there every day. Sometimes it'll be a nugget about some historical note, but he's also very, very intelligent about working with people. And like I said, that's something I'd like to see. At the end of the interview, Brandon, I was telling him, I said, well, we need to make sure that Rob is, brushing up his resume, because if they don't give Lou Jeter's gig in Miami, I think he'd be ideal for a new MLB commissioner.
Maybe Lou Schiff could be the new commissioner. I mean, actually, no, it might not be the greatest idea because he loves the game. And most importantly, he seems to have common sense about the whole thing. But much like all of our esteemed guests, and Lou is no exception.
Yeah, we need a new set of eyes there because Rob has been working. I think he's been commissioner now since 2015. And he was actually working in some capacity, I think, with MLB all the way back in 94. When Bud Selig and the rest of them said, basically that's when they had to deal with the strike because they weren't able to come to terms with a union. And then the whole thing just went to heck, and it had to go to federal court for something to happen, an intermediary. I don't know where we're going to be just yet, but I do want to take a look here too, how the union felt after yesterday. Here's some words that Tony Clark, the president of the Major League Baseball Players Association, had to say after MLB came up and Rob Manfred had his little press conference at 5:00.
We came to Florida to navigate or to negotiate for a fair collective bargaining agreement. Despite meeting daily while here in Florida, there is still work that needs to be done. We are seeking improvements to our CBA because significant improvements are needed. We've made no mistake about that fact over the course of the last 3 or 4 years based on what we've seen on the field and off the field. It's against that backdrop of growing revenues and record profits for owners in the league that players seek and deserve nothing more than fundamental fairness. Players want to play. We all know that. But the reason we're not playing is simple. A lockout is the ultimate economic weapon. Let me repeat that. A lockout is the ultimate economic weapon. In a $10 billion industry, the owners have made a conscious decision to use this weapon against the greatest asset they have, the players. But the group won't be intimidated. I've seen more unity over the last few years than at any time in our recent history. Our guys care deeply about the game, care deeply about the fans, and care deeply about our player fraternity. And they are focused on improving the rights and benefits for today's generation of player and for the generations to come. Needless to say, we remain committed to the bargaining process and getting back on the field as soon as possible.
Basically what he was saying, Brandon, is that a lockout is like the harshest tool, a weapon, if you will, that the ownership can use without actually making anything happen. It's their way, if you ask me, of just kind of beating on the players. It's not saying I don't really want to negotiate with you. And after what you were talking about, that one tweet earlier, it does sound like, hey, we're just going to try to work you guys and work you guys and work you guys till we get what we want. And that doesn't sound like the art of compromise.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I've never negotiated a thing in my life, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But I'm pretty sure negotiating, it, like they say, it takes two to tango. And one side would give concessions, the other would not. They would barely move on their stance. The one side forced a lockout and took their sweet time to get to the negotiating table and barely put any serious effort towards anything. And they're really not reading the room at all to realize this could kill the game. And they're basically doing it to themselves. And they're not thinking long term. They're just thinking short term.
Well, what is it that they're even arguing about at this point? We know there's not going to, the first 4 games of the season, the first 2 series have been canceled. And what is it that MLB and the Players Association, what are they arguing about now?
There's a whole bunch of things that they're arguing about. The ones that I keep seeing are salary arbitration, pre-arbitration bonus pools, minimum salaries, and the CBT. There are other things that they're negotiating, but those are the 4 things that I keep seeing consistently thrown out there.
Yeah, and let's take a look at a little bit of those then. I mean, if we look at, well, one of the first things that comes to mind for me is probably the last one you mentioned, and that's the minimum salary. Because the minimum salary had been, I think, around $500,000 a few years ago, and it's actually, they're anteing up a little bit here. You know, they're looking at actually taking it up, I think, as high as $775,000 was what they wanted. I can't remember what MLB was saying. Let's see.
I have it right here in front of me. I can read it off for you.
Please do.
Yeah, it was Derek Gould of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and this comes from an article that MLB Trade Rumors wrote. He noted that the MLB is offering a $675,000 minimum salary starting this year, up from $570,500 last year. They've also proposed increasing that by $10,000 per year through the CBA, which would be 5 years. And the Players Association proposed, their lowest proposal was $775,000 in 2022, and all the way up to $895,000 in 2026.
Yeah, and you know, I don't think that in of itself is anything that's going to woo the fans one way or another. They may say, well, they don't need to make that much money. I think the thing that the fans would be a little bit more understanding about is how that happens is while they're in there. There's like the pre-arb bonus pool and some other possible money coming in that way. Yeah, at face value, the minimum salary sounds like a real sticking point, but I think there's more than that the players are looking for. They're looking at a way for players who can get injured early on in their professional baseball life, a way to make sure that they do have something. I mean, you're talking about a lifespan of a lot of players. You're lucky once they get to the pros, I should say to the show, you know, maybe 4 years.
Yeah, it's not guaranteed long for everybody unless you're like an all-star level player.
Exactly. I mean, you got a Max Scherzer who's been out there forever. He's a pitcher. His body has its own wear and tear, which is different than somebody that's out in the field, but he has that. And you're going to find others who've been there for a while. But these gentlemen are the exception. Let's see, one of the other things as far as the salary arbitration, expanding it, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, reading off of the article, the MLB is willing, or the MLBPA is willing to draw a proposal to expand salary arbitration if the rest of the numbers work out. And since 2013, only the top 22% of those with 2+ years of service, or Super 2s, have been eligible for salary arbitration. And the MLBPA initially was after making that 100% of 2+ year players. And they've kind of moved downward as the proposals have gone on. And MLB considered changing the 22% figure to be a non-starter, but they did agree to that change a decade ago.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of little pieces to this puzzle, more than what we're talking about here. You had CBT, and that's what the competitive balance tax, luxury tax is known by some.
Basically a fancy word for saying low tax or soft salary cap. And Bob Nightingale reported that MLB proposed increasing the CBT from 22 to 26, the years, and it would go 220 million, 220, 220, up to 224 in 2025. And then in 2026, it would jump up to 230 million. And the league also dropped its proposal to increase the tax rates for exceeding the threshold, whereas the PA proposed 245 million in 2022, working its way up to 273 million in 2026.
Okay, that may be a little bit deep in the weeds. But what that really is the luxury tax is how much a team would have to pay if they went over a certain salary each year. So we're talking about what, 220 million is the baseline. Is that right?
That's what you can freely spend up to until you get sort of like a financial penalty. I think I explained it a little bit a few weeks ago, where it's kind of like every dollar you spend, you have to spend another dollar more once you reach that cap. If I spend $5, or say $1 is, you go $1 over, then you'd have to pay like $3 as a tax penalty or for exceeding the luxury tax.
Right. Well, tell us some more what's going on out there. I know that Heyman is not the only media guy covering what's going on between MLB and MLBPA. Any other insights or things you'd like to share from the world of media?
A lot of people have done a good job. Evan Drellick from the Athletics, he's done a good job as well. But Jeff Passan, I mean, he's rocketed up to my personal hero this past week. I mean, the man simply has no F's to give. I mean, I don't think he's aiming for a job on MLB Network. And he basically called out Major League Baseball and the owners in an article he wrote earlier this week. And I'll read off some paragraphs from you about that. Quote, Major League Baseball is in a crisis of its own making, a self-inflicted wound born of equal parts hubris, short-sightedness, and stubbornness from a class of owners who run the teams and seemingly have designs on running the game into the ground. If you went and got the next 1,200 baseball players in the world, the product would suffer greatly. If you handed MLB teams over to any 30 competent business people, the sport would not suffer. Actually, it might improve. It doesn't take a billionaire to leverage a spot in a legalized monopoly with profound built-in revenue. The Yankees are not the Yankees if Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Mickey Mantle, and Yogi Berra don't win. Without the best players, they aren't in the World Series. And without championships, there's little more than an organization in a big market whose laundry features pinstripes. One would think then that a league would recognize that its profits exist because of Shohei Ohtani, Fernando Tatis Jr., Mike Trout, Juan Soto, Mookie Betts, Ronald Acuna Jr., and Vlad Guerrero Jr., and others, and would see players' concerns about the state of the game not as trivial or excessive or outrageous, but vital.
Wow. Jeff Passan is really on the mark. Well, you know, Ken Rosenthal has been, well, I don't have anything from him in front of me at the moment. He's been very critical and very insightful. You know, he got canned by Manfred for saying some things that weren't so friendly, but the good news was that he was already working elsewhere. So with the Athletic, and there's few voices out there who feel like they can speak. I mean, if we look across all of baseball, how many of these people are basically being paid by MLB and MLB TV? Good Lord, man, trying to find anything about those, what's going on with a clear mind and a clear thought. You're not going to find it there. Those two guys on there, we won't name them here, but when you're watching them, you have to say, okay, yeah, I know where you're, which side your bread is buttered on, but you're getting it buttered on both sides, and you're just oozing MLB Manfred all the time, to the point of why even bother watching you? You're a propaganda piece at best.
Yeah, they're very limited on what they can say, or they'll get the Ken Rosenthal treatment of saying, yeah, you're not needed here anymore. Third prize. Passan hits it on the head, and Lou Schiff hit it on the head, where the owners are going to run this game into the ground. And because people aren't really in the mood for this in this day and age, they can move on without you. you and Lou were joking about how people are going to soccer or John Boy's going to cricket, and you're promoting softball and college baseball. There's other sports people can get into. Like, I can recommend so many things for you right now. Watch an NHL game. The Lightning just played in a Stadium Series game. It was really cool to see. NASCAR. I mean, people might not like going cars in circles, but I enjoy it. It's a fun way to fill my afternoon. And guess what? The racing's actually pretty good. So they race in Vegas this weekend, so tune in for that as well. There's other ways for people to fill their time. And it's something that it may not hurt baseball, this year or next year or the year after that. But over time, they're really going to feel it, and they're going to have nobody to blame but themselves.
That's absolutely solid. And the question that's not being asked enough, and maybe they just don't think it's worth knowing, what happens with all this as far as dollars? I think Lou said this too, who's making the money as far as working at the stadium. I mean, the guy who hands out the programs, the vendors at the stadium. We're talking about even the people who are spending advertising dollars with the regional sports networks. So many different folks that are dependent upon money coming in, with baseball. What's going to happen? A lot of times we've seen through COVID, people have walked away from jobs, rethought their life, and have not come back. They haven't returned as COVID got better. Guess what? That's probably going to happen with the fans, and it may happen with a lot of the people who are involved working with baseball, on the sides. So I don't know. It's like, what's the matter with these people? I think Sarah Sanchez was bringing up, hey, Jeff Passan, what's ESPN think of this? Why aren't they saying anything?
I mean, ESPN's probably trying to protect that Sunday Night Baseball contract.
Do you think on the backside there, you think somewhere there, they're putting a thumb on Manfred or someone saying, hey, guys, guess what? If you want to make some money, we've got to make some money. We've got all these games scheduled. We're paying you X to be covering that so many number of baseball games, and you ain't delivering. Is there a private conversation being going on there? I mean, I could see why it wouldn't be out in the general public.
At this time, I'd say I don't think it'd be like a full-on conversation, because I mean, we got the NFL Combine coming up, and you can laugh at me, but people do enjoy watching underwear football and guys working out to see how they measure up. And then the NFL draft coming up. So ESPN has that to talk about. The NBA season's winding down. It's going to be playoff time before you know it. And even the NHL is on ESPN now. So they have that to fall back on. So I don't think they would really get to that conversation until May, when the draft is done, and then NHL and NBA is in the back half of their playoff runs. So I don't think they're like full on panic mode, but I could be wrong.
Well, if they were in panic mode, I guess we would have heard something more about it than this. But I still think that, it hurts so many of these communities. And like we're talking with Lou Schiff earlier, as everything came in with spring training, and there's just a few weeks where they're making a lot of money, whether it be from the snowbirds, everything else that goes on with that money's not there. It's not happening this year. And those businesses will suffer. And the fans are suffering, and the fans just may not come back. There's more and more options. You and I've talked about it before. You've talked about NASCAR. I've talked about softball, which I think is a great sport, collegiate softball to follow, but in collegiate baseball, I don't know, brother. I'm about ready to go with John Boy, and let's go watch some cricket.
I don't know a dang thing about cricket, but it looks interesting. They got it's like bowling, baseball all knocked into one. I don't know how it works, but I'd watch it if it was on.
I'm with you. But another thing, I'm going to say something else that Tony Clark from the union said the other day. And during a brief press conference, he said, there is more unity that they have now than he's seen in the last few years. He's never seen this much unity as far as players coming together. So they're standing firm, and we may not have a season this year, boys and girls. I've half jokingly, I was saying, what C's are taking for odds on a season for this year. And I wouldn't bet on it. I'm looking at the other sports, but we'll still keep covering it. We'll still keep covering the business of baseball.
I've heard, and this is from someone who it's not a personal source of mine. It's somebody I listen to on the radio who I trust with information. I've heard them recommend July 4th could be an opening day, or sometime in May could be an opening day. And I kind of bounced an idea around in my head about that being a topic of why that could be bad for baseball.
Yeah.
But like it or not, NFL spring training camp opens up in end of July. And
There you go.
if people don't have you on your mind, especially in this day and age, and you're starting late and they're already starting to turn their focus towards the biggest sport in America, you're going to hurt yourself long term. And it's not going to be like COVID where you're one of the only sports on at the time.
Yeah. I don't have words for it. I mean, I'm exhausted. I am completely exhausted with this whole thing. And I think a lot of fans are getting there as well. And you and I have talked about before, I've known people coming away from the 94, 95 strikes that they walked away from baseball. Let's hope that doesn't happen. And I just don't know, brother. What else do you have to offer? Anything new, exciting, loving, joyful?
Not quite as joyful, but you and Lou were talking about it, how Jeter is leaving the Marlins. I have a couple of things on that.
Yeah, I think that may have come out of the blue for a lot of people. Lou talked about they keep things kind of close to the vest. They don't air their dirty laundry or what they're not so much even dirty laundry, but if they're working on an idea, they don't necessarily just throw it out there in the media. So it came as kind of a surprise when Derek Jeter said, "Hey, I'm actually stepping away from this. Got a year left on the contract, I understand, but I'm going to go ahead and step away from this." And the Capitan has left the building. So give us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, he basically put out there that he's no longer going to serve as CEO or as a shareholder in the club. He went on to say, quote, "That said, the vision for the future of the franchise is different than the one I signed up to lead. Now is the right time for me to step aside as a new season begins." And then he went on to do all the typical things. Like, "I'd like to thank everybody for all that they've done. It was a pleasure." All that, the gratuity things, which you wouldn't expect anything less.
No, and he's a good man. And I've always felt that way about Derek Jeter. I mean, you're talking about a guy, a Hall of Famer, who got everything but a complete approval by the entire staff. What was it like? Of all the writers who voted for the Hall of Fame, only one did not vote for him. And, that was crazy. He seems like a very honorable man. Again, I don't know him. I wonder if he already has something in cooking. I mean, it would seem like he probably would. We think back to Theo Epstein when he was with the Cubs, and when he left, there was talk of him saying, "Well, I'm looking to be in an ownership group." Maybe he and Jeter get together, but he actually went on to work for MLB. I'd be curious to see where Jeter does land.
I heard somebody throw out him working for MLB. I also saw on Yahoo Sports that ESPN could make a push for him because I guess the chairman or something, he's a big Yankee fan. So he was he liked that idea a lot. So that could be a possibility as well. But my perfect idea is him, Theo Epstein, and Tom Brady would just buy the Rays. I mean, you want to talk about a team that would strive for competitiveness. You have the most competitive guy from the NFL in Derek Jeter and Theo Epstein.
I love that, man. That should be a thing. That should be a thing.
Out with Stu, in with TB12.
Oh my gosh! I'm ready to buy the product right now. Wow!
I'll do the TB12 for a month or 6 months, however long it takes for that to come true.
All right, Tom. I'll go ahead and get together with a good buddy Derek Jeter and Theo Epstein to see if things could happen. I can't imagine the whole ESPN thing. Can you imagine though Jeter sitting across from A-Rod with all that love?
That'd be an awkward broadcast.
Yeah, to say the least. Oh my gosh. Well, I got nothing else. You got anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Well, let's wrap up with that little piece of heaven. I like that. In lieu of all the other crazy things, speaking of Lou, thank you to the Honorable Lou Schiff of Baseball and Law. That's his handle on Twitter, Baseball and Law. And follow what he's doing as far as keeping up with the news of baseball and the history of baseball. And we send our condolences to the Marlins, but we also send them congratulations if they're smart enough to hire Lou as the president to fill that open position. He would be the guy to make it happen.
Yeah, he would. Big thanks to him. It's always good to hear from him, especially because it's over a podcast and not in a courtroom. But he does always bring good stuff to the show.
I like that, man. Yeah. Okay. All right, everybody. Take us all the way out, Brandon.
Yeah, again, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to Lou Schiff for joining us. Remember to like, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, your mom, your dad, your dog, whoever about us. And we'll do our best to keep you entertained over however long this lockout off season lasts.
That's right. Thank you, Brandon.
And don't forget to follow us on Twitter. I'm at Sports Splits Pod, and Mark, you're at The Baseball Biz.
You got it. At The Baseball Biz.
And you can find Lou Schiff at Baseball and Law on Twitter.
So, yeah, you can follow us there. And also, if you're listening where you are now to us, you can also find us on Spotify. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. Oh, you can find us everywhere. We love you guys, and we look forward to talking with you guys again real soon. Special thanks to X-Take RUX for the music Rocking Forward.